Hi, I'm Carol Gold.
I'm Steve Clark, and today we're going to be talking about a course that's come out, basically telling you what's right and what's wrong. Written by a guy or being promoted by a guy named Richard Marbury. And Richard Marbury, if you don't know, has written a series of books talking that delves into ethics, justice, freedom, and basically kind of gives a worldwide view of his framework of how he looks at the world. And interestingly enough, he's actually now selling a course to companies and to people to take on your basic ethics, basic morality questions. And I just found it amazing that that course in this day and age can sell. But I know you have your thoughts on it.
Well, it is surprising that it would sell. It's not surprising to me that there's a need for it, okay? Because we know, we deal with it every day. We deal with it in business, people that we do business with. We deal with it, we see a whole generation that basically is disconnected from what I think are fundamental principles that cultures have, and our culture in particular, has lived with in the past, that have come to us through both religion and through the Constitution in some instances, where there are principles that have been guiding principles that have, we've had our mistakes, we've made our errors, we've had, every generation hasn't been all charm and lightness and whatever, but we've been on a sort of straight and narrow for a long time that has been grounded in and surrounded by some basic values and principles. In business, there was a time when a handshake in many businesses was good enough. Now, it doesn't matter if you have a written contract. Somebody's going to break it, and some lawyer, and I can say that because I'm some lawyer's going to help you get around the contract that was drawn up for the very purpose of you not getting around it. So we've lost these fundamental principles, and I think it starts with the individual. It starts with each of us getting more and more lax in our own lives with the standard that we hold ourselves to. I really believe that the reason humans need principles, guiding principles, values, whether you get them, you don't have to be God-fearing. I mean, is it Penn and Teller? It's the one from Penn and Teller.
One's an atheist.
I can't think of his name.
They're actually both atheists. Penn and Teller, yes.
Yeah, but the one is always, he's brilliant, and he's always the one who talks, not the one who doesn't.
Right.
And he's an atheist, but
right.
His ethical principles and the standards to which he holds himself are very high. So that means that that's how he does business, and that's what he looks for in other people. That's what he's teaching his children. He's walking his talk. And what happened to us is, with each successive generation, maybe for the last 3, we've walked our talk less and less and less and less. So we all still know what's right and wrong, but nobody much cares anymore whether they do it or not. Because the answer is, what's expedient? How do I get from point A to point B as fast as I can with as little resistance as possible? And if that means chucking a few values and a few principles and some ethics and some honesty, well, okay, but I was in a hurry, or I had to do this, or my family needed this, or there's always a reason why people do this. And so I think the reason, he obviously perceived the need, okay, which is why he wrote the book, or he has the course, or both. The reason that it's a teachable moment, the reason that there's actually a need for that, is because we've stopped teaching an entire generation. I heard yesterday the statistic that between the ages of 18 and 50, that's the generation we've lost. That's the generation that doesn't know our history, that doesn't know ethics, that generation is lost, I read. But you want to focus on the future, you need between age 2 and age 18. That's the next generation. If we can put some of these principles and values back into people. Very hard to put things into an empty vessel that has a hole in the bottom, right? And have it fill up because it's got a hole. When you've got an entire generation that was miseducated, taught history wrongly, not talk ethics, not talk principles, and God was taken out of the culture. So you lost religion and you lost ethics and you lost philosophy pretty much too. These are like empty vessels, this whole generation. And it'll take forever to fill them up, and maybe you never will because they're already sort of cooked. That's why I think he's reached out. He perceives the problem. And if you're a business owner, let's say, and you have ethics or you care about them, It's a great program to bring in and teach your employees because you know they need it because it doesn't exist in business anymore. And if it does, it's very rare. I personally, I'm tough in this regard. I hold myself to a really high standard, and my daughter always, gives me a hard time about it. And it's how I raised her, because to me, honesty is everything. But I was raised that way. I was taught that when I was raised. I think that if you're not taught it, either at home or through the culture, it's not human nature to behave that way. We're more animalistic than we are angelic.
I think you've touched on some points that I want to address. I think that the big thing was really kind of the decisions in the 50s where they took God out of the culture. And this is not meant to be a conversation about religion, but think about it this way. In any type of kind of religious conversation, you're going to be taught the basic principles: what's right, what's wrong, do unto others, don't steal, don't lie. And if you raise a culture that's the base of society, which I think from the 50s to the 80s, where everybody kind of goes through that, when you're taught history, they're teaching you history, but you have the basic fundamentals, the base to grow from. Mm-hmm. If they teach you something like a hard discipline, law, finance, something along those lines, you're learning law and you're learning finance from the basis of to do the right thing, look out for your client, have their best interest, all kind of really basic human fundamentals. I think what's happened is that once you remove those basic fundamentals, people are now being taught law without knowing what's right or wrong.
Correct.
People are being taught finance, not knowing that their first and foremost duty is to their client. So if you create a business framework where people don't know the rules, I think that's what you've seen, especially in 2008, where you saw the housing crisis, where it wasn't just the banks that were involved. There was a whole slew of people that all made a series of bad decisions. Getting back to your point about you being somebody who's moral and has ethics, that's all well and good, but it's almost like you're the white spot in a sea of black.
Believe me, I know this.
It really doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter what you believe, because when you're dealing with everybody else that's operating on a different operating system, it really doesn't matter anymore. I find it fascinating that this guy is able to sell his course. And just so you know, I do get his newsletter and I do read his material. He has said it's been selling extremely well. Why? Because the senior leaders at this company know that when they hire, for example, a junior salesperson, they have to be taught, you have to take care of the client. You can't steal from the client. You can't rip them off. You can't give them bad terms. You can't, for example, when you go have an expense account, you can't abuse it. All these basic things they are finding in corporate America is completely lacking in that group of people.
I think that if you look at leadership in this country, as particularly if you look at the government, you can see how this lack of ethics and this lack of principles has finally bubbled up to the point where they're the leaders that we have. So we've earned them through our own abdication of ethics. I mean, we know that this administration, we know all administrations are not fully open and honest with us, but we know this. Hillary Clinton is running for president. She's a known liar. She's a criminal. She's committed treason. If you don't want to use language that strong, you at least can look at and say there's inconsistency in our stories, there was a violation of some federal law in setting up the private server. But see, we have those leaders. There are people who think Donald Trump's behavior is abhorrent because he mocked a handicapped person and because he speaks ill of certain women and whatever. But what we don't want to take responsibility for, I think, Steve, is that we earn these people. People say, how is it possible in a country of 350 million, whatever we have now, how is it possible that these are the only two choices we have? Well, guess what? I think we got the choices we deserve because we have allowed this, we have bred this culture that doesn't care about honesty, that doesn't care about integrity, that doesn't care about compassion and how you speak. We're very busy with political correctness, but we're actually very unkind to one another. So this is a really detailed discussion, and we're kind of out of time. So we've touched scratched the
Correct.
surface, so to speak. I think we'll pick it up again next time
Great.
and try to go deeper. I'm Carol Gold.
I'm Steve Clark. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.